Welcome to This Week from the Principal's Desk, a podcast about Christian schools and their leadership. This podcast is hosted by two Christian school leaders. My name is Rob Lunak, and I'm the superintendent of Lutheran Neighborhood Schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
My name is Mike Sheeman. I'm the executive director and head of schools at Trinity Lutheran in Bend, Oregon. And Rob and I are going to talk about kind of an interesting topic today because probably like a lot of administrators out there, people are going to have to face this at some point or another when you personally have your own kids in your school and some of the maybe challenges but blessings that can also bring about because it can really be a fine line to walk for a lot of different reasons. And Rob and I thought we would just dive a little bit into some of our experiences with that and other stories that we've heard, but maybe just get people thinking about like, how do you handle those things proactively when it comes to your own kids? Because we know that, sometimes that can be looked at as a good thing. You got your kids in the school, but then people say, oh, we got to guard against favoritism. Oh, we got to guard against, all these other things. Or how do you set boundaries when your kids are inviting kids over to your house and they want to do playtime with them or whatever? So Rob, I thought let's chat and see how it goes and what we can kind of come up with around that topic.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those things that will be familiar to a lot of people, and it's going to look different for everybody. So your situation's different than my situation, and my kids are like 3 and 7, so I'm learning as I go. I'm trying to figure out how everything looks in my house, and then figure out everything that looks at school, and how to merge those two. And it is definitely a fine line to walk. And I'll say this, as a leader, if you're listening to this, if you're not thinking about it, either you have all the answers, in which case I need you to call me and give the answers to me because I need some, or it's just this thing that's always in the back of your mind. And that's probably a good thing because the perception of the people in your school community does matter. And you need to see how those things come off. And how do you balance that? How do you make sure that you're treating your kid fairly? You can never treat them like some random kid because they're not. They're your kid. That's always going to be part of it. But that doesn't mean they should get special treatment. But on the other side of that doesn't mean they should get unspecial treatment either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it comes down all the way down to kind of even the minor things about like when your kid is walking the hallway, is it "Hey Dad" or is it "Hi Mr. Sheeman"? Like how do you want them to address you? And I'm not saying that there's a right or a wrong. I know that some people have a real bent one way or the other. The reality is that all the kids here, they know that those are my kids. So I have a 10th grader, an 8th grader, and a 6th grader. So Rob and I are kind of representing two different almost phases of schooling from the youngers to the olders here. My kids, they call me Dad, and they have no problem walking down the hallway. "Hey Dad, how's it going?" The other kids around them have always called me Mr. Sheeman. I've never had a kid slip up and call me Dad. That'd be fun. But and I would give them a little grief for it too. But I think there is that relaxed atmosphere. But when they're at school, I've always told my kids, I fully expect you to uphold all the school rules. When you're at school, I'm going to treat you like any other kid. Now, the students that are students here, I love them all to pieces. And I, discipline out of love. I encourage out of love. I support them out of love. And my kids are going to get that exact same treatment here too. One of the things, though, that I did put in place is I always have another administrator or a lead teacher or somebody who's kind of holding me accountable to that and just checking in, that if there was ever something going on that they heard something, that they would come directly to me and say, "This is what I'm hearing," or maybe we got to watch out for that. I'm blessed that it hasn't really happened, but the one thing that I did set up at every school where I was administrator, my kids attended, was if they ever got in trouble, who's dealing with them? And I praise the Lord, we haven't really had to go down that path, but there's always been somebody where I've said to them, "Listen, when it comes to my kids, you're in charge, and what you say goes." And they've treated them like they would any other kid, and it's been great. It's been great, but I know that there can always be that perception from other people about, oh, the principal's kids getting special treatment or things like that. So if you can proactively set some of those things up, I think it's good for you to do that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really smart idea, that to just eliminate some of that. It's, hey, I can't handle this situation. Or, we're in a unique situation now where my wife is a teacher. I serve in a different capacity for our district and not for school directly. And so, if my kid gets in trouble at home, especially our youngest right now, he's in my wife's class. Like if he gets in trouble at home, he gets in trouble with his teacher, who's his mom, and then when he gets home, he gets in trouble with me, who's his dad, right? And our oldest, like he's gotten in trouble at school before, and that is such a weird one where you have another principal calling you that you see professionally in all your principals meetings, and what do you do there? Well, you take your principal hat off for a second, like, hey, I'm just a parent right now. Forget that I work for the district, forget whatever my role is right now. I'm just dad. So what do you need from me as a parent to make sure this interaction goes well, and to support the school and make sure my kid doesn't do silly things again to get in trouble, right? And that is such a, I'll say, a line I struggle with. Like when we had a birthday party for Jesus at church over the weekend, and we go, and there I'm just a dad, which is awesome. But then, like, how involved do I want to be, and how like relational do I want to try to be with the other staff there, knowing that they know me in this other capacity, right? And that's something that I'll say, if you're ever at any of those events and you're a teacher or a principal who's been at these events with me and you're listening and you think I'm kind of standoffish, it's because I don't know what to do. Like I'm just trying to be a dad right there and not be anything else, right? So I'm not going to talk about like, hey, how'd this thing go or what was going on here, because I'm just focused on my kid and making sure my kid does what he's supposed to do and stays out of trouble and has a good time, right? And that is something that I'm sure I'm gonna continue to grow in and change and tweak based on how everything goes. I'm learning as I go, just as I think we all are. But I think it's important to at least recognize that it is a unique situation, and you do need sometimes little kind of checks and balances and outside eyes on it every once in a while to make sure you're not doing anything, wrong or inappropriate, or that people might view as inappropriate. Like if my kid got in trouble and I'm at that school and he gets sent to the principal's office, well, people can be like, well, he's going to get out of this. He's the principal's kid. Well, actually, if you know me, he's going to get in extra trouble because he's the principal's kid, right? Or if your kid's up for an award or honor roll or valedictorian, right? How do you manage all of those things? And I'm not saying every principal's kid is going to be the smartest kid in the school, right? Kids come in all different varieties, yeah. And we tell our kid, like, I don't care if you're the smartest, I just want you to be nice. That's our bar for our oldest, right? And when that comes to how other people handle it and what all of those discipline or award structures look like, it is something that I know we're talking about it today, but I am far from the expert on it.
Yeah, me too. But I love what you just said about be nice. I mean, that's the most important thing. Kids, stuff can be taught. Kids are going to learn that at some point in their life. They're going to learn what they need to know. For us, it is absolutely the foundational biblical values of how we're supposed to live. And kids make mistakes, but that's what forgiveness is for. We teach all that too. Rob, I like where you were going too, though, about valedictorian or awards and stuff like that. Because let's flip the coin and talk a little bit about that. I've always wanted my kids to have a fair shake at all those other things too. And perceptions are just that in a lot of cases, where people are going to perceive, oh, of course it's going to go to that kid because that's the principal's kid. And it's too bad that happens, but I don't want my kids to be the sacrificial lambs of a perception. So I've always tried to do whatever I can do to be above reproach. So when it comes to things like there's an award selection committee, and I know my kid is eligible for that award, I'm not in the room. Now, I may not broadcast that and send out an email to the whole school and say, hey, just so y'all know, I wasn't there. But it can organically happen too when people are like, it was principal's kid. And then the people that selected the award or saw what happened can be like, actually, he wasn't even there. So there's a few things you can do to make sure that you are above reproach. The other thing that I think is important, and I'm sure most places do this anyway, but really clearly spell out what qualifies a student for those things. Because then if it's spelled out really well, anybody can say, oh, the principal's kid qualified for it. It's super easy to see that this was, it made sense. Now, I also think it's good when possible to spread out awards. I'm not saying I'm not every kid gets an award. That's not me. But if you've got a couple of different candidates and they're equally qualified, one kid's got it a couple times and another kid hasn't, but they're equally qualified, I'd probably give it to the other kid. You can look at all of those things. I just really think don't let your kids become the victim of perceptions. So do anything you can to set up boundaries so that your kids can still get the same treatment as anybody else in that school.
Yeah, you want your kid to have a normal school experience. You want
Mhm.
them to have
Yep.
the average experience that everyone else is having, and that is, it's got to be tough to be a teacher's kid or a principal's kid, right? You know you're under that magnifying glass as a student, and you know that people view you differently, and things like, okay, you have a friend in your classroom who got in trouble at school and got sent to the principal's office. Well, is your relationship with that kid now damaged as his friend because your dad or your mom got him in trouble, right? Like, how does all that work? And it is real hard, I'm sure, to figure out, you know, how to manage all of that as a kid, especially like middle school, high school. Middle school and high school are hard enough. Honestly, I know you look back on it now and you're like, "Oh, everything was so easy." Like, yeah, comparatively, but like back then, I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. That's just how it goes, right? I like what you said about this. We don't want to punish them in some way because they are, you know, in a different kind of relationship than everyone else is. And that is something that I think can be difficult for them to see. And so, how do you explain that to your kids? And, you know, sit them down and be like, listen, I know I'm your dad, and I know I'm a principal, and I know you're at this school, but let me, you know, lay out what everything is like. And I will say, thinking back to, you know, my time as a teenager, I haven't had to go through this with my kid yet because he's not a teenager yet. But like when I was a teenager, I thought I knew everything and everyone else was wrong. Like I was smarter than everyone else. Adult, other person, didn't matter, right? I knew. And so if my parents sat me down and they said, "Listen, here's the way things are," I'd be like, "No, come on, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. That's just how it goes." Maybe that was just me as a teenager. Having talked to other parents, I don't think that's the case. I think it's a pretty common phenomenon there, right? But sitting down with your kids and explaining, here's the way things are going to go. I want to make sure I treat you fairly, but that also means that I'm going to listen to you if you tell me that I'm not. I might not agree with you, but I want to be able to hear you out, right? Tell me if you think something didn't go the way you thought it was, or if you thought it was too harsh on you, or you're too lenient to you. And you need to have that conversation with your kids. You need to have that conversation with the teachers who teach your kids. Like, how do you go to a teacher and say, okay, I'm coming to you now as a parent. I understand right now I'm the principal, but I'm coming to you as a parent about a concern I have about the class. How do you even touch that? Right? And that is such a difficult thing. And there have been times when my kid has, you know, come home and explained something to me, or I've heard from a teacher about something, and I've gone, you know, I would not have handled it that way. But if the stakes are so low, sometimes I go, but I'm not even going to bother because there's so much entwined into that. I'm the parent, I'm the principal, you know, my wife teaches. Like so much of that complicates things where there have been times where we've gone, it's just not worth our time to bring up, right? And that's another facet of it is how do you approach when things aren't going super well because you're not a regular parent, and so the way I've always done it is I let some things slide because it's just too messy to untangle. What do you think about all that, Mike? I let a lot out there.
No, you're right. It becomes very complicated, and I have had to do the have used those exact words that you just used to say, I need to talk to you, but I'm talking to you as a parent. I know that's awkward for teachers. So in a lot of cases, if there's issues with the school, or not issues with the school, but my kids have some sort of issue or something, my wife will deal with it. And there's times where we've been at a point where she's dealing with something, but really we both need to be there. And so at that point, I'm just going, you know what? I'm going to make that choice. I need to be there with you, and I'm going to trust the professionalism of the staff member to know that I'm coming to you as a parent. That's why I think it's important that you always have good relations with the staff. You're always doing evaluations. You're always doing these things in your professional role, so that if you have to come to them in the personal role, they can clearly see that you are dividing the two. The other interesting facet that you have to work with as well is that I've had it where my own kids have come home and said, "Dad, I got to tell you about what's going on at school," and they tell me about something, and my red flags are going up, and I'm going, "Well, I have to deal with that now," and they're going, "But don't tell anybody I told you," and and I don't want you to do anything. I just needed to tell you. So that makes it a little complicated too, when you don't want to say, well, my own kids at home told me that you're doing this, especially if it involves another student. Sometimes it's a matter of, okay, well, I'm going to do what I would do with any kid at this point. Have you talked to the other student? Have you talked to the teacher? And if it's yes, 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 well, then, okay, I activate my wife and away she goes. But in some cases, I have to separate the difference between my kids are just venting to me and they're talking to me as a dad, telling me this is how school is going and this is what's going on, versus they're telling me something and they want me to do something about it. Now, I have to have that professional hat to know if they've told me something and it's pretty serious or I can see this going south, I'm going to have to act on it. Um, but I always try. I always try to not out my kids. I don't want that to be that it came from them, because then I want to put them in an awkward spot, because I still am their dad and I want them to come and talk to me. So I really don't want that jeopardized. So yeah, I agree with you, Rob. There's times you have to maybe let some things slide, or maybe you let a spouse deal with them. I've also found if it's going to be a big problem and your kid's telling you about it, it's most likely going to come from another kid or another parent within a week anyway. You know that this is just going to surface in another way. And sometimes ask yourself that question: can you just let that sleeping dog lie until it comes from somewhere else? Is it really affecting your kid? And that's been a good kind of measure for me to use as well.
Yeah, it's really important in all of this that you have that good professional relationship, like you mentioned, and then also you are very upfront with the staff about what that looks like, and have that be a dialogue that you check in on every once in a while. So you can say, hey, if my kid got in trouble for something and you need to contact the parent and I need to be that parent that you contact, like, what's the best way for this to look? How do we want this to look like? What do you expect from me as a parent? And then how do we make sure that this doesn't damage our working relationship as professionals? Because yes, we're all professionals and we'd like to say we can all separate those things, but we're also human and we have a hard time separating those things sometimes, right? Where it's like when you tell a teacher in the morning, hey, can you come by my office in the afternoon? Well, they think the world's ending, right? Like that must be the worst thing that's ever happened. They're going to get fired. They're like packing their boxes. And you're like, no, I just wanted to let you know, like you got some mail. I wanted like, by the way, if you're a principal, if there's something really important you need to talk to a teacher about in the afternoon, tell them what it is. She's like, hey, we're going to talk about this. And then let them know like good, bad, otherwise, right? Just sidebar. And so if a teacher comes to you, you need to make sure that that relationship is good. So, you have the interaction as the parent. And then I would always check in, I guess I haven't had to yet, but I would want to check in and say, hey, a couple of days ago, we talked about this, like this, here's how I'm handling that as a parent. Professionally, is everything good here? Right? Yes or no? And take some of that feedback and take that to heart, because the way you view things might not be the way they view things. That doesn't mean either one's right or wrong, but it's all helpful information. And so that, I think that's the last thing I'll add, is that as this stuff comes up, you will constantly have to check in on that professional relationship and make sure that there's not anything that you need to tweak or adjust.
Yeah. So let's add one more layer of complication just for fun. Let's talk about when your kids want to invite other students over for a play date or a sleepover or something like that. I've never had any kind of weirdness about that. I figure these are my kids' friends. If they want to come over, yes, I'm the principal. The students that have come over have always, oh, hi, Mr. Sheeman. I'm still Mr. Sheeman in my home, not my kid's dad. And I just let him go and play, let him go be. I've never had any issues with that, and I hope I'm not like, my head's not in the sand on anything in particular. But if my kids want to play with their friends or have them over and do fun things, like go for it. Like that's part of being a normal kid. That means you're probably going to interact with some parents more than others. I think the one thing that I do try to guard is that I tend to get to know those kids better and their families better. So then when I see them at school and others see me interact with them, it maybe feels a little more natural. You're just more comfortable with them, right? You've had them into your house, you've done whatever. So I try to intentionally be aware of that, so that when I'm seeing other kids that my kid is not friends with necessarily, that I was like, okay, I need to put more effort into getting to know these kids now, because I don't have that natural connection through my own kid to get to know these kids. But I mean, if you don't have kids at the school, you have to do that with everybody anyway. So we're wired to do that as educators. It's not like that's an effort or anything difficult, but I think there's just that awareness of you have more knowledge or more, I'm going to use the word familiarity with these kids. So be aware of that and work to build it with the others.
Yeah, I think that's all helpful information. If you're listening and you go, oh, you missed something, please let us know.
Please.
I know our contact information is out there somewhere. But I think that's probably a good enough spot for us to end. And can I take the prayer today?
Go for it. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for the role of parent and the role of principal. Please bless us as we work through our weeks and bless us with Christmas coming up. Please give us wisdom, peace, and patience. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.